Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. I
Good
just
When are
morning.
saw
you
I just saw
officially
that
out of
video.
quarantine?
Well, I'm going to come out on Saturday, but I'm probably not going to go to shul because it's just the 14th day. But
Okay.
I have to do a bris on Shabbat, so I'll come out for that.
Okay.
I ju-
We look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Same here. I just saw Bela on video making a presentation to the Knesset. That
Yeah,
was
it's awesome, huh?
very cool. Very cool. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'll just look at one paragraph with you from a tshuva sefer that was written uh, about 100 years ago, in the 1920s, by a rabbi in Romania named Chaim Mordechai Roller, and uh, this was something that the Imrei Yaakov had referenced in his footnotes. So I thought it just was an interesting concept that there are certain times when you have to be suspicious if a woman is spending her husband's money, right? You have to, according to some poskim, you have to actually, at least internally, question that, and especially a person collecting tzedakah, if the wife makes a modest donation is one thing, but if she makes like an exorbitant donation, you sometimes you have to actually investigate and clarify that her husband is not going to protest the gift. So in this tshuva, Rav Roller is writing to his brother-in-law in Paris. that's it's Legisi HaTorani, to my Torah observant brother-in-law, Menachem Mendel Sarif, in Paris. Okay, so he writes as follows: Michtavcha higiani, I got your letter. Uvedavar she'elascha im rashayin limkar tachshit liisha be'ad sikum mesuyam. There's a shaila, is a jewelry store allowed to accept a purchase from a woman who wants to do it to pay in installments? She wants to do it the layaway plan, right? Be'esh tomer lahamocher ki bala lo yada mizeh. And she tells the merchant, my husband doesn't know that I'm buying this. Vihi tishalei ma'at ma'at, and therefore she says, I can only pay you in installments, small installments every week or every month. Asher kinir so it seems like based on the circumstances, ba'ala noten la kesef la hotzaos habayis, that what's really going on is that she gets a weekly stipend from her husband for the household expenses. Vihita kametz, and what she'll do is she'll be frugal in the household purchases. She'll be left with a couple of dollars at the end of every week, and she'll bring that to the jeweler. Ha'im medamim ze litzdaka, she'in mekablim mehem ela davar miut velo davar gadol. So can you compare this to the laws of tzedakah, where you're only allowed to accept a modest donation from a woman, but you're not allowed to accept a large sum? And maybe because cumulatively this will come out to be a large amount of money, you're not allowed to accept the purchase. Kibishilhi bavakama v'tur shulchan aruch yoredeya simin reish memches ad kan tochen dvarav, and he cites the Shulchan Aruch as saying that, like the Rav Shulchan Aruch had said, you're allowed to accept small donations but not large ones. Hine gam bitzdaka Yedu imhema divrei hayam shel Shlomo zal bebava kama simin nuntes shekosa v'zelashon. Well, let's take a look at the words of the Yam Shel Shlomo, who lives, I believe, in the 18th century, or 17th or 18th, I don't recall, and he writes as follows: the Ravan Zal kosav b'sefer tzofnas paneach sheha'idna nashim apotropsim shel ba'alehem. He quotes earlier commentaries who say that nowadays women are reliably considered the custodians of their husband's assets. Lokchin mehen kol davar, v'chein mekabla mehem tzedakah. And therefore you don't have to worry about expenditures that a woman makes. You can assume that she is the trustee of her husband's assets, and you can even accept charity donations from them, afilu davar meruba, and you can even accept large donations from them, according to this opinion. So according to this opinion, you can be lenient, and you don't have to question a woman as far as where her money's coming from and whether she's gotten her husband's consent. Umikol makom nir'eh hakol lefi haba'al v'isha. But he says, but there you have to also, if you have, that's only when you have no other knowledge, because this woman, you don't know her husband. But he says, if let's say it's a small community, and you know the husband, so then you have to make a determination. Dilifamim ikar hishtadlus besoch habayis ena apotropos al davar meruba. He says many times the husband does not trust his wife to be the manager of his assets on large amounts of money. Va'af imhi apotropos mikol makom ein habal marshela ela kedei lahotzi l'tzarach habayis. And even when the wife is trusted as the manager of the assets, the husband only gives her permission to use his bank account to purchase the household needs. In other words, yeah, here's a credit card, sweetheart. Do all the shopping you need, buy whatever you need for the house. But he doesn't give her permission to pamper herself with jewelry and baubles and things like that. O afilu ktsas liknos olimkar kedei laharviach. Or sometimes he'll only allow her to have a stipend to either make purchases or to sell items for profit. Avalitein tzedakah tzricha rishos bala. But there are certain marriages where the husband does expect the wife to consult with him if she's going to give charity. Ef shalomar shehi eshes chayil umechaya es ba'ala, or you could argue that maybe she's a woman of valor and she provides all of the needs of her husband, and maybe even she contributes to the assets of the family bank account. Da'azafilu sach meruba mistama marshela bala. And in that situation, since she's a contributor to the household assets, then sometimes the husband does give her full and equal rights. V'nichale she'im yimche tipasek milisa v'litein. And he's totally okay. And just that after the fact, if he protests, she won't do it again. But he's not going to try to subvert her prior actions. Sof davar hakol lefi ha'inyan v'hasiba ad kan l'shono ye'uyin sham. So the bottom line is, says the Am Shel Shlomo, that it all is dependent upon the type of marriage and the type of economic relationship that the husband and wife have. So it seems like he's being quite lenient over here. We saw the Imrei Yaakov bring from the Maharsham that you can rely on the fact, I guess, post facto, after a woman has already made an expenditure, that you can rely on this phrase in the Tanoim document that they had at the wedding, V'al yavrichu v'al ya'alimu lo ze mizu v'lo zu mizeh shum havrachas mamon ba'olam ela yishletu b'nichseihon shava b'shava, that the husband and wife will have equal dominion over the household assets that are being brought into the marriage. Uvechoshen Mishpat simen tzari vav v'shach sivkat tes dehu adin le'inyan tvia ushvuya yu'un shama b'achrona. And furthermore, a woman is also trusted as far as if claims are made against her and oaths that she's allowed to take, and so forth. We won't go into that now. Ulam ze bistam amnam b'micha habal halo halacha psuki hi sham b'yordeya simen seif dalid. He says, but that's all if the husband does not protest. But if the husband does protest, so then that's also a halacha that's brought down in Yoredeya. Then if you know the husband is a miser, or he doesn't have a good relationship with his wife around the finances, So then you're not allowed to accept even a small amount. And therefore it would seem to be the case here as well. But Rav Roller concludes as follows. He says, you don't have to be suspicious just because the woman said, my husband doesn't know I'm buying this. Because that's really the bottom line over here. It says she's actually raised suspicions about her purchase by telling the merchant, my husband doesn't know I'm buying this. So what does that mean? And I can only pay you in small installments. So does that mean that she's pulling it out of the weekly stipend that she receives unbeknownst to her husband, and it's because she needs to hide it because otherwise he wouldn't allow her to do it? And that's really where this shaila comes up. But he says, no, that's not a problem. Ein b'mashmos sheyesh kan mibala mecha'a. It doesn't mean that her husband is going to protest. Ach ki choshesha shelo yaskim lo lezos ta'aseh, ach ata ezos behele mimena ad shetechaven es asha. All it means is that she doesn't want to tell him right now. She doesn't want to tell him right now before the fact. Because if she tells him now, he might say, how can we afford it? We're on a very tight budget. And she doesn't want to get into a whole quarrel with him over the fact that he gives her a stipend, and he thought that stipend is exactly what she needs to purchase all of the household items, and she doesn't want to have to start haggling with him. So she figures that now's not the right time for me to tell him. But I'll tell him, as I get closer to finishing paying it off, I'll tell him then, and I'm sure he'll be very happy. Asher gam haskamas bala yiyeh bazeh. She feels that at the right time she'll be able to tell him and he'll be okay with it. And so therefore Rav Roller feels that in that situation it's okay. You can't, just because she says my husband doesn't know, doesn't mean that you have to be concerned that he's going to protest against it. It simply means that sometimes it's not the right time, but later on it will be the right time. So that's why he feels that it's completely okay in that situation. So I just wanted to share that with you. Let me get back to the Imrei Yaakov. Any questions or comments on that?
Rabbi, before you proceed,
Yeah.
this recipe, the way you described it, obviously nowadays you pretty much is a recipe for divorce. If you have such a, like, we'll say, power arrangement in a marriage, like this is, I would say, I can speak for myself, and I would assume for most marriages, that if you have this type of arrangement today, like, it's almost irrelevant. So my question for you is,
I'm not so sure that I agree with that. Look,
okay,
I can only tell you that the current arrangement that I have with my wife and that I've had for the past, I don't know, couple of decades or so, is that I tell her, buy yourself whatever you want. And the reason I can say that is because I have a wife who's more frugal than I am. In other words, I have trouble getting her to spend money. And
right.
when you have that kind of relationship, it's a machaya, it's wonderful, right? But I know of couples where the woman is a shopaholic, as they call them today, and she might go on a shopping spree, and then her husband, the husband looks at the credit card bill at the end of the month, and he hits the roof. It doesn't mean that they're headed for divorce, but it definitely means that there may be an issue. She may have
No,
a shopping addiction.
no, that I agree. That definitely, but what I'm saying, the whole tone of, the way that it's described back then, it's definitely, I think you would agree with me, women are in general in a far different position than they were when that was written. Correct? Like, most women are educated, most women, not necessarily are working even in a from marriage, but just the culturally, we're not in that same type of situation where, the woman is basically, if she's not, um, if she's not destitute, if she would leave the marriage. I mean, it's still there, does exist, but you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, the tone of kind of this almost paternalistic where the husband is in complete control of the funds and the wife. It's just, I mean, I just don't think it's a recipe for nowadays. At least, maybe I don't know, maybe in a more Haredi community, but at least in we'll call it a Bayit community, I really don't think that type of thing. It's a good recipe for a healthy marriage. Would you agree
I would
or
agree
not?
that it's probably there may be tensions in the marriage if the husband and wife are on different pages.
Yeah, no, I'm saying if the husband comes, like let's say the wife spends an extra, $500 this month. I mean, definitely you can sit down with her and say, listen, honey, we're very tight. It's COVID. I lost my job. We can't afford this. As opposed to, speaking to your wife as if it's your daughter, or like a child. Anyways, the reason I'm asking you this is obviously we would both agree things have changed in society, which has a huge impact on how we would deal with things nowadays, right? Women are in a far different position
Yes.
than they were. I forget when you quoted this, in the 1800s, or like,
This is from the 1920s.
sorry, 1920s. Like things nowadays compared to the 1950s, the 60s, obviously are quite different. So what I would assume that when you counsel, let's say I'm sure you have people that come to you with such issues where the wife is a shopaholic, and I'm sure your advice is not, listen, you got to sit her down and berate her and let her know that this is not halachic and you can't do this. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to raise, is that things have definitely drastically changed.
Correct. Things have, yeah. I mean, the way that rabbis counsel is generally not based on the halachic parameters. I mean, that's probably been true for centuries, though.
Okay.
There's the cold legal facts, and then there's what will save the marriage and the relationship, right?
Right.
And the rabbi has to know the difference between when he's wearing his halachic hat as a posek and when he's wearing his uh, um, domestic counselor, a therapist hat, as trying to smooth things over between two people, and so
Look,
even if I have this halachic knowledge in my back pocket, right? That really the husband has a right to control, halachic right to control the assets that he brings into the house, and the wife has limited control of the assets that even she brings into the household, because the husband really technically can even control what's called her ma'aseh yadayim.
right.
Technically speaking, from a halachic standpoint, whatever a woman earns, the husband still has financial control over, unless, the Gemara says, unless she says, I'm financially independent of you and we're going to have separate bank accounts. And you don't have to pay for anything. We'll split the mortgage, we'll split the utilities, we'll split all of our household expenses, and then I have a right to use my salary for whatever I want. That's usually, I don't, there may be couples who have that, where especially where the wife's earnings are very close, or sometimes exceed the husband's earnings. There may be situations like that. But in a situation where they have a joint bank account and they deposit everything together, they both have jobs, technically speaking, the husband has full control over how that money is spent in the household.
Right.
That's what the Gemara says. You're right. It is paternalistic, and it has been that way all the way up until the end of the 20th century. But so nowadays, right? If a couple comes to the rabbi with marital issues, and one party, usually the husband, complains that his wife does not know how to maintain a budget, so there's ways to address it without resorting to the halacha.
Right. Yeah. So again, the point that I was trying to make is there's a, by the book, the husband has the full rights to be in 100% control over what's going on. But in reality, if you do that, it's probably not the best thing to do if you want to be happily married. Because if you're on top of your wife and telling her, oh, this month you spent an extra $50, and this time, why did you do this? And how come you gave this amount of tzedakah? You're just asking for trouble.
Right, right. Yeah, and again, it all depends upon the financial means of the couple, right? And it depends on how responsible each party is.
One other thing I just want to ask you, and I kind of alluded to it the other day, and again, I don't know where I'm quoting this from, but I was taught in a Shalom Bayis class many years ago. Let's say you've got $500 to spend. That if you have a choice between buying yourself like a new suit, or buying your wife jewelry or a new dress, and your children new clothing, that your outlook should be, let me buy my wife and children as opposed to myself. Am I quoting correctly? Like
it could be you're quoting someone correctly. I don't know who that person is though.
No, just
I
because
mean,
I was taught that years ago, and it served me well, because honestly, like, I don't know how most of the men in the group feel. Like myself, I could wear the same suit probably for 50 years and not give a hoot about it, as long as it's presentable and there are not holes in it. But women, by their nature, even though they bought a dress last month, like to buy a dress. They're much more into purchasing new items, I think, than men are. And now I wouldn't say
yeah, but
all
Alan,
men.
what if it's between a new dress and two tickets to a Patriots game?
Well, that's tough. That's a very well, nowadays the Patriot, Tom Brady left, so it's less of an issue. But prior, I agree with you, would be a very tough call.
Okay, we've all got our priorities, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay.
So, Rabbi, I'd like to just add to Alan's question, and that is, what happens in a situation? Let's say you have a Haredi family where the husband spends his day learning, the woman supports them. The husband has control over that income.
Uh, yes, the husband, if they have a joint bank account, and the husband usually reserves the right in a marriage like that. The husband reserves the right to pay the bills, to take financial responsibility of or financial control, I should say, of the assets of the household. Um, he can reserve that right. But it is an interesting point you raise, Wayne. What if the husband is unemployed and the wife is the earner, and she technically has a right to say to her husband, "Eini nizonis ve'eini osa." Don't you husband are absolved from all financial responsibilities, and I will support myself. That's the language of the Gemara, that she can actually say, "Don't pay for anything for me. I'm going to take care of myself, and you can fend for yourself." Technically, a woman has a right to say that, and the husband has the biblically halachic obligation to at least provide her with a roof over her head. In a situation where she volunteers to work so that he can learn, and he's not making very much money or nothing at all, then he still has a financial halachic obligation. In other words, the point that I'm making is that these arrangements where the wife works and the husband is not the earner, is not something that was legislated either by the Torah or by the Gemara. It's a phenomenon that is anomalous to the Gemara. How it became the norm in certain communities, where the wife is expected to go out and get a job so that the husband can learn, is part of the unfortunate distortions that took place in the late 20th and early 21st century in certain communities. Part of it is a result of the Holocaust, and the trauma of the Holocaust. and where some rabbinic leaders felt that because of all of the Torah scholarship that was lost in the Holocaust, it became necessary to distort the norm so that we could rebuild a generation of Torah scholars. But it got out of control very quickly, especially in Eretz Yisrael, and it's become completely upside down. The economic system where the wife is expected to work so that the husband can learn is not at all documented in the early sources. It's not provided for by the Torah. There's nothing in the Torah that talks about the a woman supporting her husband. It's not documented in the Gemara because the Gemara requires the husband to provide for his wife, and in exchange for his providing for her, he maintains control over the finances of the household. But even in a situation where is independently wealthy coming into the marriage, the most that she can say is that I don't need you to provide for me, so don't expect me to surrender any of my work product to you. I get to keep whatever I earn in the course of the marriage, and you don't have to feed me, you don't have to support me. But even then, the basic requirements of every husband, according to the Torah, is what's called she'er, kesut, and onah, which is you have to provide her with a wardrobe, her head, and you have to provide her with conjugal duties. And those are things that are biblical. It's recorded in the ketubah, and it's a bit of a mystery how whole societies, how whole communities have sort of basically placed the onus on the wife to sort of forego all of those obligations that the husband has upon the wife. It's very it's mystifying. It's really mystifying, and I'm sure there are explanations for it. But what regardless of the explanation, that was never the Torah nor the Talmud's intent when it talks about the structure of a marriage. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Rabbi, sorry, one last thing. And
yeah.
I'm sure I agree for most people. That was beautifully said. If that would be said publicly, you'd probably get canceled. But what you've said is like the Torah view of how a marriage should be, and somehow this distortion. I think probably, as you said, there were very good intentions to rebuild Torah scholarship, which is very valid, but it's gotten out of control, and it's unfortunate that view, like if you would go down, I won't specify communities, but if you would publicly say that in certain communities, especially in Eretz Israel, you probably would not be, invited back as the scholar of the for the Shabbos or something.
Yeah.
But
Well, look, as someone once told me, I'm not here to make friends and gain popularity. I just, you have to, at some point you have to say what is correct. That's the role of any individual who speaks his conscience. But the fact of the matter is that, I mean, even my own daughter, when she went to Beis Yaakov in Los Angeles, it was drilled into her that there's an expectation. The highest level of achievement that a young Jewish woman can achieve is if she is able to support her husband in kollel. That's what is expected of her, and that's what she's supposed to accept upon herself. And they point to Rabbi Akiva's wife, who who sent Rabbi Akiva away so that he could learn in yeshiva, and she took care of her kids and the family while he was away. And we don't know whether she sent him money every month. That there's no documented story about that, but certainly she basically told her husband, "I absolve you from any financial responsibility, so that you can go and learn Torah without having to worry about the burden of supporting a family." And that is what is held up to Beis Yaakov girls as how they're supposed to live their lives. But but that was a unique situation. That's a one in a generation situation. No economic community can survive based on that model for any extended period of time. And thank God we're seeing it starting to deteriorate and crumble in Eretz Yisrael today, because it's just simply not sustainable. And it doesn't really exist that much anymore in North America, although there is still that expectation in certain communities that the woman is going to be the main provider, at least for the first few years of the marriage.
I
Okay.
want to,
Well,
if I just want to, one quick thing. I know we're running against the clock, but I want to add one thing in to give some insight. Marcella, for the last year or two, has been very involved with Shidduchim. And unfortunately, so many girls who are looking to get married have that outlook. And I would hate to say, have been brainwashed with that outlook. And they will only go out with guys who like are learning full time and they fully expect to work. And a lot of them, unfortunately, because they will not even look at guys who work, are like, they can't get married. So there's a lot of damage that has been done from that.
yeah, I would agree, and I think that it's quite unfortunate, and I hope that the leadership wakes up and changes its curricular priorities and the message that it gives to the girls that are in the more Haredi schools, because it's doing a lot of damage. Yeah. Okay, and on that note, I wish you all a wonderful day.
Right.